Welcome to Drive the Daf. Clear, structured explanation of the daily Daf in 20 minutes. You can even follow in the car.
Rosh Hashana Daf Chaf Dalid continues the Gemara's description of how witnesses were accepted and how they were judged as far as their honesty concerning their testimony that they had seen the new moon and Rosh Chodesh could be declared. There are two Mishnayos on the Daf. First part of the Daf discusses some of the things which we asked them in order to help determine if they were telling the truth or not. Our first Mishnah introduces the reaction of the Beis Din when they accepted the witnesses, how it was declared, and how the Tzibur responded, and the Gemara will give us the sources. And a machlokes about when you have to say Mekudesh and when you did not have to say Mekudesh. Second Mishnah tells us that there were images of moons which Rabbi Gamliel used, and the entire second half of the Daf will discuss, is it permitted or forbidden to have images of the moon? We'll have a lengthy back and forth about that halacha. So, the Gemara begins by quoting our last Mishnah, and the Gemara notes that we asked the witnesses if they saw the moon to the north or to the south. And the Gemara quotes conflicting brises as to whether it had to be that the moon was north, and if they said south, their testimony was disqualified, or it had to be the opposite, it had to be to the south, and if they said north, their testimony was disqualified. The Gemara says not a contradiction. One is in the winter, and one is in the summer. In the summer, we expect the moon to be to the south, and in the winter, we expect the moon to be to the north. Now, there's some discussion here in the Rishonim as to what this means. Rashi says it means north and south of the sun, the place where the sun sets. As you recall, the new moon is only seen just after sunset, in the few moments following sunset, before the moon itself sets, and there's enough lack of light from the sun in the sky to be able to see the moon. And north and south means north and south of the spot where the sun is set. Now that is difficult to corroborate by looking at the sky astronomically, and others therefore understand that what it means is north and south of the midpoint of the horizon. Either way, that's how the Gemara explains what has to be seen. Now the Gemara brings another brisa which discusses what we asked him. We asked him, how high was the moon from the ground when you saw it? So it was measured in terms of marda'os. A mardas is a stick that's used to move along an ox. It was long, and it had a fixed length, which everybody understood, and they used to measure things in terms of mardas, almost like a yardstick. So if one witness said it was 3 mardas high, and one said it was only 2 mardas high, that's not a conflict. That could be an estimation, and therefore we could accept them and say that it's not a contradictory testimony. However, if it was off by 2, like if one said 3 and one said 5, then we could not take these two witnesses together. They were not looking at the same thing. However, we didn't throw them both out. We just put their testimony on hold. If there was another third aid that fit with one of them, then we could take those two as a pair and we would accept their testimony. Now the Gemara discusses other types of scenarios in which we may or may not accept them. So the Gemara says, there's a brisa that says if the witnesses said we didn't see the moon directly, we saw its reflection in the water, or we saw it in a glass, like a glass lantern, or we saw it from shining through the clouds, so then we don't accept that. Now, if, however, they saw half of it in the water, half of it in the clouds, half of it in the lantern, we don't accept that either. Gemara says, well, obviously you don't accept that. If they didn't accept when you saw the whole thing, you're certainly not going to accept if you saw half of it. Gemara says, no, half we mean half in the clouds and half clearly, half in the water and half clearly, half in the glass and half clearly. Still, we do not accept that. Next brisa says, if they say we saw it and then we didn't see it anymore, so we don't accept that either. Gemara says, what, they have to see it the entire time? They have to keep their eyes on it fixed the whole time? What does that mean? Gemara says, no, it means that if they saw it indirectly, like they just noticed it and then they went back to look for it and they couldn't find it anymore, then we don't accept it, because that which they saw kind of peripherally or incidentally could be they were looking at the wrong thing. They saw a white crescent-shaped cloud and they thought it was the moon, but that's not really what it was, and therefore we can't accept that testimony. Alright, this takes us to our Mishnah. The Mishnah discusses Beis Din's Mekudesh. So as we shall see in the Mishnah in the following Gemara, there were 2 steps in declaring the new month. Number 1, Beis Din had to decide, is Rosh Chodesh day 30, and it's a short month, the preceding month was only 29 days, or is Rosh Chodesh day 31, and the preceding month was full 30 days. That's a decision. Besides for that, they also had to do a declaration of Mekudesh. They had to declare that this is Mekudesh. Now, some months possibly were Mekudesh, some months were possibly not Mekudesh. We'll see there's some opinions that they didn't do Mekudesh at all. But Mekudesh is the declaration, not the same as the decision. You can make the decision without the declaration, and you could just say, let the word out that this has been a full month, or this has been a short month, without the Mekudesh exclamation. So the Gemara says as follows: the Rosh Hashana, the leader, would say Mekudesh. When the decision was made, and he wanted to do the process of Kiddush HaChodesh, he would say Mekudesh. The Rosh Chodesh has been sanctified. And all the people would answer afterwards, Mekudesh, Mekudesh, twice. Now, when did they do it? Did they do Mekudesh on a 29-day month? So they were saying it on day 30. Did they do it on a 30-day month? So they were saying it. On day 31. Did they do it on both, or did they do it on neither? So we shall see. Our Mishnah and our ensuing Brisa have different understandings of this. Our Mishnah says in Machokes. Our Mishnah says they did it both types of months. Rav Elazar bar Tzadok and our Mishnah disagrees, and it says they only said Mekudesh if it was a short month, a 29-day month, and they were making Rosh Chodesh the earlier of the two options. They were making it on day 30 and not day 31. Then they had to say Mekudesh. Once day 30 passed and they didn't say Mekudesh, they don't have to be Mekudesh day 31. It's automatic. He says it's Kitshuhu Shemayim. It can't possibly be day 32, so they didn't have to do anything. Alright, the Gemara begins now, and the Gemara asks, first of all, how do we know this halacha that you have to declare Mekudesh? So the Gemara says it's learned out of the pasuk Vayidaber Moshe as Mayadei Hashem. Moshe declared the Yamim Tovim of Hashem. Simple pshat means he told Klal Yisrael about it, but the limud over here is that he declared it. He said the Moadim. He established them by saying. You have to say when Rosh Chodesh is. Now Moshe said it, and the Rosh Bezdin takes his place as a leader, and he has to say it as well. Says the Gemara, how do you know that the people have to answer? So the Gemara says two sources. Number one, it says Asher Tikru Osam, that you call them. Osam is spelled without a vav, so it's spelled Atem. Asher Tikru Atem, that you all have to call it. You all have to declare it as well. Now the source is, it says Eleheim Mayadai, these are they, my Yomim Tovim. They should say it. The Haim refers to Klal Yisrael. They should be the ones to say it as well. Says the Gemara, okay, now we know Klal Yisrael have to say something Mekudesh. Why do I have to say it twice? The Rosh Bezdin only said it once. The Gemara answers, the pasuk says Mikra'e Kodesh. They are called plural Mikra'e, plural callings Kodesh. So there's a twofold declaration of Kodesh, and that is done by the Tzibra. Okay, now the Gemara brings the Brisa as to which type of month required a Kiddush. So the Brisa begins with Plimo. Plimo says you were only Mekadesh it if it was a long month. If it was a 31-day month. His reasoning is that if it's a short month, then you did not need to declare that it's Rosh Chodesh, because the point of declaring it was that people should accept it, that it should be well known and famous. People naturally accepted a 29-day month. It was a logical thing. Yeah, 29 days, and then it's Rosh Chodesh. To make it longer, that was a departure from what people would have expected. To say no, Rosh Chodesh is not day 30. It's an extra day. Adding a day to the month, that required chizuk, and therefore it required a announcement of being Mekudesh. So that's Plimo, the Tana Plimo's approach. Rav Elazar, Reb Shimon says you're not Mekadesh it either way. At no time do you actually have to say Mekudesh. And he learns from a pasuk. It says V'kidashim l'shnas chamishim. The Bezdin has to be Mekadesh the year of Yovel. It says you're only Mekadesh years. You're not Mekadesh months. And there's no concept of Kiddush at all. It's not the correct halacha at all. Now this is Rav Elazar bar Shimon, not to be confused with Rav Elazar bar Tzadok. In our Mishnah, Rav Elazar bar Tzadok in our Mishnah said that we declare it if it's a short month and not if it's a long month. So the Gemara says, what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, halacha is like Rav Elazar bar Tzadok. We declare a short month, we do not declare a long month. Abaye says we see that in a Brisa as well. I'm going to prove it to you from a Brisa. What's the Brisa? It actually seems to be the Mishnah in the next parak, but the Gemara calls it a Brisa. The Brisa says that if all of Klal Yisrael and the Bezdin were able to see the moon themselves on day 30, so it was clearly a short month, but they did not get a chance for whatever interference laws. They did not get a chance to actually say Mekudesh until day 30 ended. It's not Mekudesh. Day 30 is not Ben Rosh Chodesh. It's going to be a full month, even though all of Klal Yisrael already saw the moon. And the way the Bryce expresses this is that the month is Mu'uber. The month is extended. It is a large month. It's a full month. So now Abaye makes the point. We say it's a full month, but we don't say that they're Mekadesh it the next day. We don't say that the business has to go ahead and be Mekadesh it on day 31. Because they don't have to be Mekadesh on day 31, says Abaye, because it's automatically Mekadesh. Because like Rav Elazar Bar of Tzadok said, you only Mekadesh it. It's for 30 if it's day 30, and not Mekadesh if it's day 31. He says that's not a proof. It could just be that you are Mekadesh even if it's day 31, but the Mishnah or the Brisa wasn't pointing that out. The Brisa was just making the point that the month is extended even though everybody saw the moon on day 30. The fact that you saw it doesn't count. Bezin has to make the decision and actually declare it. If they didn't, then it automatically becomes a 30-day month, and Rosh Chodesh is not until day 31. Now, you do have to say Mekadesh, but that was not the Mishnah's focus. Okay, this takes us to our next Mishnah, which will introduce the topic of are you allowed to keep shapes of moons of any of the heavenly spheres. So the Mishnah says that Rabban Gamliel, when he was the head of the Bezdin and he was responsible for making the determination, Kiddush HaChodesh, kept a number of images of the moon in his office, on the wall and on charts. And when witnesses would come who were not expert in the moon or were not able to declare what they saw properly, he would show them the images and say, did you see it like this? Did it look like this? Did it look like that? That was an aid that he used. So the Gemara asks, are you allowed to have images of the moon? The Torah says, Lo Sasun E.T. You're not allowed to have with me. Now, E.T., the Gemara understands as a drasha, as Lo Sasun E.T. You can't have, that means images of things that are with me. You can't have images of things that are with me. Meaning you can't have things that you cannot have an image of those that serve me. The Gemara says, Lo sason iti, lo sason kidmus shimshai. Don't make an image of those things that are with me. So you see here then, you're not allowed to have images of the heavenly bodies, the sun and the moon, that they are in Shemayim, Ke'ilu, that they are Mashamash HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Gemara now enters on a long series of attempts to limit this halacha such that it would be permitted for Rabban Gamliel to keep the moon. We're going to have a lot of different ways of defining the halacha of not having images. We're going to keep expanding it slowly but surely to try to define it in a way that it does not include Rabban Gamliel's shapes until we get to a final answer. So first we're going to say, no, this halacha does not apply to heavenly bodies at all. When we say you cannot keep the Meshamshim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's referring to the Kelim in the Beis HaMikdash. It's not referring to the heavenly objects altogether. And the Gemara quotes a Brisa that shows you cannot have the Kelim of the Beis HaMikdash. You can't have an image of them. The Brisa says you're not allowed to make a house look like the Beis HaMikdash. You're not allowed to make a porch look like the Chatzar. You're not allowed to make an Achsadra, a portico, look like the Ulam. You're not allowed to make a table look like the Shulchan. You're not allowed to make a candelabra look like the menorah. Now, you're allowed to have one which is not the menorah. You're allowed to have one which has only 5 branches, 6 branches, even 8 branches. You can't have 7 branches. Since you're not even allowed to have 7 branches of a different metal, because the menorah would be kosher in a different metal. Rabbi Yossi Bar Yehuda says you can't even have one made out of wood, because when the Chashmonayim defeated the Greeks, they could not afford a golden or a metal menorah, so they made one out of wood. So Gemara says, no, that one wasn't made out of wood. That one was made out of metal sticks with no design, covered with tin, and tin, when it ages, looks like wood. It wasn't real wood. Wood you're allowed to have. So then, the Gemara says further, when the Chashmonaim became wealthier, then they made another one, this time out of silver, and when they became even wealthier than that, then they were able to afford a real menorah made from the gold that it's usually made from. But what we see from here, that this is an answer that Abaye is giving, is that when we say you cannot keep the Meshamshim, you can't have images of the Meshamshim, it's not referring to the heavens at all. It's referring to the Kelim in the Beis HaMikdash. So the Gemara's question is that's not true. We see that it's forbidden to have things in Shemayim also because of a brisa that says Lo sason iti, lo sason kidmus shemshayim shamshim lefanei b'amarim. You cannot make the things which serve me in the heavens, this brisa says. So it's not limited to the Kelim of the Beis HaMikdash. So Abaye adjusts it slightly, expands it a little bit, but he says it's still not going to include the moon. You can't have the kalim of the Beis Hamikdash, or you also cannot have the 4 images which are on the face of the Kisei HaKavod, the heavenly throne. The face of the Kisei HaKavod had 4 images on it. You cannot have those 4 images together. So Gemara says you can't have those 4 images together, but I mean you're allowed to have each one by itself. One of those images was the images of a person, the face of a person, but you're not allowed to have the face of a person. If a brisa that says you're not allowed to have an image, not allowed to have a statue with a human face. So Gemara answers, no. What we mean to say is that there's a special limud that you cannot have a human face. We have a drasha lo sason iti, we darshan lo sason oisi. Don't make my face. Obviously, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't have a face, but because people are made in the image of God, so you can refer to God's face, as it were, as being a human face. So we have a special different halacha that you can't have an image of a human face. Besides for that, it's only forbidden to have all 4 faces that are on the Kisei HaKavod together. So anyway, this is what's meant by the brisa that says you cannot have lo sasoniti, you cannot have my mashamshim in the heavens, meaning the faces on the heavenly thrones. Someone says, but that can't be. You have a brisa that explains it further. It says you cannot have those that are mashamshim lefani b'maram, those things that serve me in the heavens. All types of angels, all types of malachim. So you see, it's not limited to the faces that were on the Kisei HaKavod. It's all things, and therefore it's all heavenly things. It should include the moon also. Gemara says no. It's limited to things which are in the upper heavens. These angels serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu on the 7th Rakia and the upper levels. But the sun and the moon and other heavenly spheres, those objects are in the lower levels, and therefore those are permitted. It's only forbidden what's in the upper levels. Where it says that's not true either. We have a brisa that says you're not allowed to have things in the upper levels or the lower levels, and it specifically mentions the sun, the moon, and the stars. And the limit is as follows: you're not allowed to have asher b'shamayim mima'al. It says asher b'shamayim is to include the sun, the moon, the stars, and the constellations. And the word mima'al, from above, refers to even above that refers to the higher level, that refers to even malachim. You can't have images of them either. See, Brisa clearly says, specifically, you're not allowed to have an image of the sun and the moon. The Gemara answers no. This Brisa that says you're not allowed to have images of the sun and the moon and the other heavenly spheres is not saying you're not allowed to have the image, it's saying you're not allowed to serve the image. Rav Gamliel didn't serve it, he just had it. Gemara says, no, that can't be correct. Because if you're not allowed to serve it, it's not just the sun and the moon that you're not allowed to serve. You're not allowed to serve anything. You're not allowed to serve even a worm. You aren't allowed to serve anything. It cannot be that it's telling me you're not allowed to serve the sun and the moon. Or an image of the sun and the moon. You're not allowed to serve any image of anything. Somebody says, you're right. You're not allowed to serve any image of anything. Like the pasuk says specifically, Asher b'shamayim mima'al, you're not allowed to serve. And Asher ba'aretz mitachas. Asher ba'aretz, meaning those things on the earth you're not allowed to serve, including the Gemara quotes a brisa that says including mountains, hills, seas, rivers, valleys, fields, all these things you're not allowed to serve. And mitachas means even a tiny worm you're not allowed to serve, even a worm which is underneath the surface of the earth. So the answer here is that you aren't allowed to serve any of these things, just as you said, and we have a special limud to include everything else. Shomer says, no, but you're not even allowed to own it. You're not allowed to own it. We have a brisa that says, lo sa'asun iti, you're not allowed to make them. Nothing to do with serving them, and you aren't even allowed to make these things. Shomer says, okay, so there's a different answer here. The Isser is only making them. Rav Gamliel didn't make them. Somebody else made them. There's no Isser to have them, to have these images. The Isser is to make the images. So Gemara says that's not correct, because we have a conversation between Shmuel and Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda had a ring that had a protruding image on it, and Shmuel said you have to destroy it. You're not allowed to have that image, even though it was made by somebody else. Gemara said that was different. That was a protruding image. Rabbi Gamliel did not have protruding images. Didn't have a statue. He just had a flat image or an indented image, an engraved image. Protruding image you're not allowed to have. The Gemara quotes a brisa that shows that. It says if you have a ring that has a protruding image, you're not allowed to wear it. You are allowed to sign a shtar with it. You are allowed to use it as a seal by pressing it into wax so that the image that's formed on the wax will be engraved, but you're not allowed to wear a protruding image. Now, if you have the other way around, if you have a ring with an engraved image, then you are allowed to wear it because it's not protruding, but you are not allowed to seal wax with it because then you'll end up with a protruding image in the wax. So either way, we see you're not allowed to have a protruding image. So that's what's meant over here. You're not allowed to have a protruding image, but Gamliel did not have a protruding image. I said, but that's not correct either, because there's a shul that had a statue. There's a shul in a place in Naharda that was called the Shaf V'Yasif. Shaf V'Yasif, Rashi says, either was the name of the neighborhood or it means that it was destroyed and rebuilt. And they had a statue there. There was a king. The king built a statue of himself there. And Ram and Shmuel's father and Levi all went to be mispalo over there. So there's no problem of a protruding image. Now, the Gemara explains that the problem with the protruding image is that it's chashad. It looks suspicious. It looks like you may have served it. That's why you have it. The Gemara's question then is, though, but we see all these people went to that shul without any concern for chashad. Nobody suspected them and everything. So the Gemara says, no, the shul is different. Because there's a large congregation there, nobody's going to suspect anybody else of building it for avodah zarah to serve it, because there's a lot of people here that use it all at once. So the Gemara says, but then that doesn't explain Rabban Gamliel. Rabban Gamliel did not have a lot of people there. So how could he have this image of this moon and not have any images again? Same chashad. So the Gemara gives three answers, and these are the final answers. The Gemara says either it's permitted because Rabban Gamliel was the Nasi, and therefore there was a large group of people always with him. He was never alone, and therefore there's no chashad. Or, second answer is that Rabban Gamliel's images of the moon were not a solid image. They were pieces assembled together, and that's permitted. And the third answer is that you're allowed to have an image which you use to learn, which you're using to study from. You're not allowed to have it for other reasons, but to study, that you're allowed to have. The Gemara brings a pasuk that says, Lo salami lasos, but you're not allowed to learn to make these images, but you are allowed to use them to learn chachma and understanding.
Drive the Daf is a project of the Grand Woodlands Shul and is presented by Rabbi Yitzchak Landa. Find us on YouTube or subscribe to daily emails by emailing drivethedaf@gmail.com.